Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is James Farganne. James reached out to us here on the Leak Project a few weeks ago, and because of the time zone difference, he's on the other side of the world, we've been trying to put together a time frame for him to discuss the information that he has on one of the most catastrophic events in modern history. The Fukushima disaster. 6 nuclear reactors going into meltdown, and the official version of the story is because of a tidal wave that caused certain mechanical issues and breakdowns, which then led to 6 reactors going into meltdown and blowing up. Well, the information that James is going to share with us here today is quite different, so be prepared for a mind-altering, paradigm-shattering discussion. James, really appreciate you spending time out of your day. I know you're very busy where you're at, so thanks a lot for joining us here at the Leak Project. If you would please just give us a real brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll get into why you feel this is important to put yourself on the line and discuss the possibility of Fukushima being a lot more of a tactical attack than just a natural disaster.
Yeah, Rex, thank you for having me on. I am conducting this interview from Seoul, South Korea, which is not too distant from the epicenter of the disaster. And well, I don't want to get too much into my personal history, but I will say that I've been here for quite a long time, and it's my home. So when this thing struck, well, I looked at it with a lot more curiosity than perhaps most did, and it set me off on a real journey of discovery and into a real pitched battle in trying to spread information that the powers that be really they didn't intend it to get out, and when it did, well, it was a real pitched battle, and it took a lot out of me. I had to take some time off, and this is my, climbing back into the saddle, so to speak. So if I could, I would say that your listenership is pretty 9/11 literate, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay, so just to couch this in a nutshell, Fukushima was Japan's 9/11, and Reactor 4 was Japan's Building 7. Is that clear and succinct enough?
So, well, Tower 7 was a heavily fortified building. I mean, it had a lot of very sensitive material, and nothing hit Tower 7, yet it collapsed within its own footprint. I mean, it was actually protected by other buildings. So the official version, why it collapsed within its own footprint is pretty ridiculous. I mean, so let's blame it on alien technology of box cutters from people that live in the Middle East. I think that's a real good explanation of that event. So yeah, don't worry about the box cutters. There's alien technology in them, so you can't take those on an airplane. That's
Well,
the official version.
we've got the owner of the building on tape saying pull it. Okay, but the point being that and we've got the footage of the BBC reporter reporting its collapse
Right.
20 minutes before it went down, and it's standing in the skyline behind her.
Yeah.
Okay, so the point being that Building 7 was impossible. Okay, I mean, the official account of how it went down is impossible. All right, in the same fashion, Reactor 4 at Fukushima was flat out impossible. And this is really the linchpin. And I'll just come out and say it. It's a good place to start because I'll start with just the fact, and then I'll back it up. Building 7 on the day of the disaster, or not Building 7, Reactor 4 on the day of the Fukushima disaster was mothballed for maintenance and refueling. This means that the dome over the core had been removed. The core had been removed. It was disassembled. It was not operating on the day of the disaster. Now, a mothballed reactor does not explode. Moreover, a mothballed reactor does not explode in, there's just so much to this. These GE designed reactors were massive structures. I mean, we're talking 9 foot thick rebar reinforced concrete. We're talking, solid steel, layers of solid steel, several feet thick. And this thing was obliterated. You look at, if you, look at the gemstone.is website that you've got there on the screen. To the upper, kind of to the right, Cornerstone Report, Fukushima Sabotage. And you're going to see an image below that link. Now that is the link to the 48-page PDF report that lays all this out in, all the detail. Jim Stone is the man who did the report. He's the man that did all the research and put the report together and had to flee the United States afterwards. You see the image to the right.
Wait a second. He had to flee the United States?
He had to flee the United States. We'll get to that in a minute. I just want to finish this point. You see
Okay.
that there's that PDF image under the Fukushima sabotage link. The third image to the right, you see that explosion?
Oh, yeah.
That's reactor 4, which was not operating and disassembled on that day. Okay? That's why we say that is Japan's Building 7. That does not happen. See, 2 reactors exploded, reactor 3 and reactor 4. Reactor 3 exploded in an outright mushroom cloud. Reactor 4, that might be reactor 3 that we're looking at right there because it's a mushroom cloud. But reactor 4 was a very similar explosion, just as intense, and it was disassembled and not operating. The official narrative that's pushed by people like Arnie Gunderson, who's a fraud and a shill, is that these were hydrogen explosions, which is just rank and utter nonsense. I just put out one linchpin there. That's one of 2 real linchpins in this. Now, yes, he had to flee the country. Yeah, where do you want to go with this next?
Well, let me just bring that up for a moment. So he had to flee the country. Do you personally know why? And can you share that with us here this evening?
Well, I know the story that he told me and others, okay? And so just to back up and kind of bring this back to a more personal level, I was here on, March 11th, and I saw the footage of the tsunami coming in, and I was stunned, I kind of it kind of took me back to being in New York on 9/11. I wasn't in Japan, but being close to home, I was just dumbfounded, and I had a weird feeling about it. I didn't quite know why, but I'm a very strongly intuitional person, and just something about it bugged me, and I became kind of obsessed with it. I kept watching it and just like, something's not right about this. Something's not right about this. But I just couldn't put my finger on it. Now, at the time, I was a big follower of Jeff Rentz, Rentz.com. I was kind of a Rentz newsfeed junkie. Are you familiar with this site?
Oh, very familiar.
Yeah. It's kind of a dark labyrinth of doom. And, I was just obsessively searching for truth, and I've got a really good BS detector. I don't fall for nonsense. I'm real careful about what I incorporate into my worldview. Very selective. And I was just digging. I was just obsessively. I just knew that I had to find something. Now, one day I was digging through Rentz's newsfeed and I saw a link to this report. Pulled it up, skimmed through it. Wow, I got to study this thing. Started to really, study it. Wow, I was blown away. And it was on a kind of a, sorry, Jim, but, it was kind of not a very slick website, nothing slick. Obviously, it didn't have any kind of money behind it. It was all just like hand-coded HTML, kind of slipshod, which kind of, for me, it kind of gave it an aura of authenticity to it, like
Didn't look like it was corporate paid for.
Yeah, it was just like some guy that was onto something and madly trying to get it out there. Got it posted to Rentz, and then I think it was later that day Rentz pulled it. It was no longer there. Okay, well, that's weird. It was just gone. And so I studied that thing and I studied that thing and I studied it. I read it over and over and over again. I did all the references, cross-checked all the footnotes, everything. And at the end of about like 2 or 3 weeks of studying this thing, I was left with like, okay, there is no BS here. This is this is adamantine truth. This is a diamond, you know. And Rentz pulled it off of his feed. And who else is talking about this? All right. I'm looking around at the alternative media. This is another facet of, this topic because this is a litmus test for alternative media. All right. And by doing this interview, I'm calling out Jeff Rentz. I'm calling out InfoWars, Alex Jones. I'm calling out, a lot of people. And I'm going to be doing some name dropping here. Okay. Because I looked around, Rentz posted it briefly, pulled it. InfoWars, nothing. Natural News, Natural News mentioned it to Mike Adams. Mike Adams, is that his name? His credit. Mike Rivero, What Really Happened? He mentioned it. Just a handful of places referenced it. Meanwhile, Wired.com did a hit piece on it. They got like their tinfoil hat Tuesday thing.
Yeah, the Danger Room.
The Danger Room did a hit piece on it. Okay. But they didn't debunk it. All they did was just kind of slander it in a silly way. They probably that was probably strategically a bad thing to do because if they drove people to go look at it, anybody with any intelligence can see that, I mean, Wired I think that was a stupid thing to do. So, oh man, I just got this obsessive, um, intuitive, I call it the voice. It's just this intuition that says, you've got to get in touch with this guy. And I'm thinking to myself, why? Why do I got to? No, you got to get in touch with this guy. You got to get in touch with this guy. You got to get in touch with this guy. Well, he had his email there with a note below it that said, note, if you write an email to me and you don't get an answer, it means I didn't get your email. All right. I'm scrambling. I'm running around. I'm being pursued, but I am checking my email. If you send me a serious email, and you're not a troll, I'm going to answer you. So I wrote him and I wrote him and I wrote him, nothing. And so it got to the point where I was running around major, metropolis, checking into completely random, PC cafes, and just at random, getting starting up random email boxes just to try to get through. Nothing worked for months. The report came out in May of 2011, and it was. I tried for like how many months? Until January of 2012. I was miserable. I was miserable. I felt like I had to reach this guy. There was something that I had to do, and finally, I made friends with an engineering student. He was a guy from the States who was getting a master's degree in electrical engineering at a university here. Made friends with him. And I says, hey, one day I was like, you're an engineer. You'd probably dig this. Sit down and have a look. And we sat down for an hour or so, looked over the report, and he was blown away. He said, this is just astonishing. I says, well, I can't get a hold of this guy. Why don't you try? So he did. And I think within an hour, he got an answer. He's like, oh, you're writing from South Korea. Your syntax is not Korean. Or you sound like you're from the States. And then I got through. And from then on, I was, in daily, almost hourly contact with him via email. Came to find out that he had a business. I think it was a vending machine business that, enabled him to have time to do investigations. Now, a little background on Jim. He claims to have been an NSA analyst at some point in the past, who I guess he peeked over his compartmentalization cubicle and saw some unsavory things going on. And he decided that he wasn't going to be a part of that anymore. And so he left and ventured into various types of businesses to support himself while he did other sorts of investigations. One of which was a major viral story on, I think it was a swine flu vaccine scam that he did with his wife at the time. That went viral.
You mean
He
the
did a
swine
major.
flu vaccine isn't good for you?
Yeah. It's even worse. That rabbit hole is even worse than most people who are even really digging hard into it. I mean, that is a deep, dark rabbit hole, the vaccine thing. We can't get in. We could get into that in another program. But
Assimilate into the Borg.
oh, it's just, oh God, there's some dark stuff out there, and you're gonna encounter it. Looking at this guy's work, he did a major report on Jenin, which was a major war atrocity committed by Israel that most people don't know about. He did a lot of stuff in the past that just never really hit the alternative media is kind of like the new mainstream. Sorry to say, but anyways, his story is that when he finally published his Fukushima report, he was walking down the street one day and a van pulled up and they picked him up and took him off to a jail without, they held him without charges. He didn't get his phone call. And one day, I guess a deputy was put, placed at the desk for a couple of hours, and the deputy wasn't in on what was going on, and he managed to get his phone call. He called a friend who came and got him out, and from then, I can't go into too much detail, but he didn't have a passport. He was running around the country trying to he was camping out, eating out of pizza dumpsters, and using Starbucks Wi-Fi, and he finally got a WSA passport, World Service Authority passport, and he made it into Mexico, and that's where he is to this day. He's based in Mexico. He's running his website out of Iceland because it's the only place where he can manage to keep it up. So that's the short and skinny on Jim Stone, right there. So I was my impression was I was one of the few people that was able to maintain contact with him during his exodus from the country. And I I endured some really strange harassment techniques during that time. I don't want to go into too much detail about that here either, because the main focus here is to get the
Would you
information from the report out. But I
give us just a couple examples, maybe?
well, okay. I was locked out of multiple email boxes. Just go back and the password just doesn't work anymore, and password recovery options just wouldn't work. So I was using a Mac at the time. Just really strange anomalies with my desktop, with the mouse doing things that I wasn't making it do. And and what I've learned in retrospect is that I was probably doing a screen share with a spook somewhere, and I didn't, an involuntary screen share. I set up a Citibank account here in Seoul to try to scoot some money to him, to help him. He was having some hard times, and we were trying to figure out, because PayPal wasn't working for him, nothing was working. So we hatched a scheme to start up a Citibank account, and because there's Citibank all over the world. Started up a Citibank account. I parked like $5 in there to see if I could, see if it would work. The next day, I get a text message saying that my account has been closed, summarily closed, and no, you can't have your $5 back. Just shit like that, and also some more esoteric stuff that we could get into, cell phone towers and lily waves from electrical wiring, and cell phone, piggybacking brain waves onto cell phone signals to, just kind of mess with your physiology, that kind of stuff.
Would you hear like high pitches and things that would kind of interfere with the way that you felt, like your equilibrium?
Oh yeah, yeah. Again, I really don't want to get too far into that right now because I, I'd like to that's a big topic, and I've I've been a victim of that kind of stuff for years. Okay, and it's a big interest of mine to mm, figure out different ways to approach that and help people because I think there are a lot of people who are victims of this sort of thing, and they may not realize it. And there are ways to defend against it. There are techniques to ward it off. Let's just say that I have it's not an exaggeration to say that I've been tortured. I consider myself uh, to have been tortured. That's not too strong of a word. Um, but just the pushback on this information was incredible. And the fact that so many in the alternative media, so-called alternative media, either turned a blind eye or actively suppressed it, um, speaks volumes. So, with that said, I'd like to say that one of the good guys is Henry Mackau at henrymacau.com. Because when I finally did get in touch with him in January of 2012, we were trading emails back and forth, back and forth. I was like, I felt I needed to contact you because I felt like there was something I needed to do, and to and back and forth, back and the idea got hatched that I should you know write about it and try to stress test the alternative media and see who would be receptive to a write-up on the report. This is a big, massive report. It needed a short write-up that would draw people in and inspire them to take the time and the effort and the work to go through this massive report. So I tried a lot of different sites. Frankly, I think well, many said no, or they weren't interested, or just didn't respond. But Henry Mackau got back to me and he said, "Yeah, okay. I tell you what, you've got 1,000 words. And by the way, two people have tried and failed. Two other writers have approached me about this report. And I gave them 1,000 words and they couldn't do it." I said, okay. And I tell you, it's one of the, I'm a writer, and it was one of the most difficult things I've ever written to condense it into 1,000 words was incredibly difficult, but I did it. And Henry said, "Congratulations, you're in." And so now he had a relationship with Jeff Rentz, where Rentz would link to his articles in his newsfeed. And so now I'm going to click over to my first article with Mackau, the argument that Fukushima was sabotaged, and you'll see that there's a note at the top. Jeff Rentz refused to link to this article. He thinks it is a psyop to absolve the nuclear industry of blame for Fukushima. Fine, but when I posted it anyway, so people could decide for themselves, he announced he would no longer link to my site. You will no longer find my work on Rentz's site. And then that led to a huge row. Rentz's ex-wives started contacting Mackau with their horror stories, and it turned out that like Rentz is, it's just, I'm not going to get into all that, but I will say that David Icke posted this article on his newsfeed, and this is the follow-up article, Fukushima, What Really Happened. Icke posted this at the top of his newsfeed on that day, but then Mackau started slinging mud at Rentz, getting into his personal life, and Icke didn't like that, and so he severed ties with Mackau as well. But it was a bit of a shitstorm there for a while. So these are the two seminal articles that I would encourage people to start with. If you go on to Google and just Google like Farganne, Mackau, Fukushima, you're going to get these two articles. First one is the argument Fukushima was sabotaged, and this is the gist in 1,000 words. And the follow-up article gets into more detail on more technical detail how the Stuxnet virus was involved and several other things. So I think I've talked enough. Where do you want to go with it now?
So let's get into the actual report itself that you had the opportunity to read multiple times and you wrote about it. So walk us through it. Those that are not going to, that haven't had a chance to actually read it, let's get into maybe some of the details and what really told you, wow, Fukushima is not what it seems.
Okay, well, the first thing is, okay, you can go to YouTube, and you can dial up footage of that tsunami rolling onto Sendai, which is the area of Japan where Fukushima is located. And I think the odd thing that was poking my brain when I first looked at it was, okay, Mag 9 earthquake. Well, that's 9 out of 10. And 10 is like planetary destruction. That's a big earthquake. Well, where was the damage? Where was the structural damage? There was not a crack in the sidewalk. There was not a single structure collapsed. There were cars driving down the road. And you can actually find dash cam footage, of someone driving down the road, and the earth is kind of gently rocking a little bit, and there are people standing on the sidewalks looking kind of confused, and then here comes the water, right? Well, what's up with that? Because there are several things to understand here. Just one thing for reference, okay? For example, the Kobe earthquake of 1995. That was, I believe, a 7.2. And I didn't dial up images of that, but I guess I could here. Sorry to make clicking noises, but
that's fine.
I'm gonna have to use the keyboard here. Google and images. You can. Okay, this is a Kobe earthquake, 1995 damage. Okay, look at that. That's a 7.2. Elevated highways toppled, massive, apartment buildings and department stores collapsed. All right.
Click on just one of those for a second, if you would. Like maybe the one that's got the multi pictures on the left there, that's got like the 5 pictures in one.
The one that's got 5 pictures in one. This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a 7.2. Now, reference. The Richter scale is, I believe the word is logarithmic, meaning that a Mag 3 is 10 times the energy of a Mag 2, and a Mag 4 is 10 times the energy of a Mag 3. Okay. Each one is 10 times the energy release. Each one is 10 times more energetic than the last. Okay. So an 8.2 would be, well, let's just say this is a 7 that we're looking at. An 8 would be 10 times more energetic than this. And a 9 would be 10 times worse than an 8. So we're talking 100 times the energy of what did this. All right.
Okay.
Supposedly, not too many miles out in the ocean. I think it was something like 18 miles or something like that out in the ocean. Now, here's where the trolls came slavering it. Well, the ocean absorbed all the energy from the quake, which is nonsense. The ocean is at its deepest is, I don't know, what, 8-9 kilometers at its deepest. When you compare that to the thickness of the planet, the diameter of the planet, the ocean is just the tiniest, thinnest membrane on this gigantic ball that we're dealing with, and earthquakes are just huge energetic events. All right. To say that the ocean water would absorb all that energy and somehow protect it from causing any structural damage whatsoever is ludicrous. And there are also quite a few examples of there's just a lot of historical precedents for massive earthquakes that took place under the ocean and did damage on land. But even that aside, Jim is a very thorough investigator, and he dug into the seismic records of he dug into the Japanese seismic records, and the Japanese have a different earthquake scale. They don't use the Richter scale. They use their own earthquake scale. They keep their own records, and their records did not align with the, what is it called, the USGS. And he found the seismograms, and he determined that there were, I believe, five minor, much less energetic earthquakes inland. Okay. And according to numerous uh, emails and testimonials that he got from people in Japan, who he got emails from Japanese people who basically told him, yeah, the Earth moved, but I cannot use the word earthquake to describe what I felt. Um, it did not feel like an earthquake. It made me dizzy. It felt like the Earth was sort of like being smudged around in circles, but it didn't feel like earthquakes. Okay, and so his conclusion is that there was no magnitude 9 earthquake. It just didn't happen. It's just they made it up out of whole cloth. There was no Mag 9 earthquake. That's the first thing. Um, and also there's the fact that magnitude 9 earthquakes are, I forget how far they can be felt, but I should have felt it. We should have felt it here in Seoul. We should have felt something. We should have felt some rumbling, some trembling in the ground, and nobody felt anything. So all evidence points to no Mag 9 earthquake. That was just a cover story for the tsunami, and the tsunami was a cover story for the destructions of the reactors. So what caused the tsunami? Can you what do you think would cause something like that if it wasn't an earthquake, Rex?
Well, I mean, certainly there's plenty of theories you can come up with, whether it be some type of directed tactical explosion somewhere off the coast or some type of, directed energy weapon. You could obviously think of a million different scenarios. So, what conclusions were discussed or what evidence was discussed in the report that you've had access to and researched into so much?
Jim didn't come to any specific conclusion because there's simply not enough information, not enough evidence to make a firm conclusion. But a reasonable guess, I would say, is that, and others have postulated this as well. Benjamin Fulford, kind of a controversial figure, comes out with some good information from time to time. Um, you know, he says that it was there's a Japanese deep sea drilling vessel by the name of the Chikumaru that was seen drilling in that area in the days or weeks leading up to the event. His story is that nukes that were recovered from a sunken Russian submarine, I think it was called the Kursk, were smuggled into Japan and onto that vessel. And it was via that vessel that the nukes were planted in the Japan Trench. All right. And so the idea being that one or more of them was detonated, which would cause a cavitation bubble in the ocean, strong enough to cause a tsunami, not strong enough to actually break the surface and create a mushroom cloud or whatever. And that, one or more of them was left remaining undetonated down there in order to force the Japanese to go along with whatever the official story was going to be and not spill the beans. So that's to my mind, that's the most reasonable and likely explanation for the tsunami. But we're just getting started here. There's the tsunami that the story is that the tsunami took out the generators and that caused the reactors to melt down and hydrogen explosions and kaboom. Getting into a little bit more detail here. Jim, he looked into the official reports from like the International Nuclear Engineers Association. I can't remember the exact name of the report, where they found that the flooding from the tsunami didn't even rise above the footings of the generators. So it appears that the tsunami wasn't even the cause of the failures in the generators. Now there were 4 reactors, 1 and 2. just went into failure, meltdown, and that was that. Reactors 3 and 4, for various reasons, a little bit better built, they needed a little bit extra help. And so they got that extra help with, you can see here on my screen, there's now the photo to the far right, that's a photo from a nuclear test, I think, like back in the 1950s in the American, Southwest or whatever. The one on the left there where my mouse arrow is, yeah, that's Fukushima 3. Okay, so look at these two.
Looks like Mickey Mouse.
Right. Okay, and so to the left of the reactor 3, it's where it says Magna BSP's OWL. Okay, and we're going to go Magna BSP here. Magna BSP was the security firm. They were running security at Fukushima. Can you guess what country they were from?
No.
Well, which country, has a huge global security industry?
It's Siemens, right?
Well, Siemens was in they designed the
Which they're a German company, aren't they?
Siemens SCADA. That was the industrial control systems in the reactors themselves. Magna BSP was an Israeli security firm. All right, the Israelis, they have worldwide security contracts, airport security, industrial security, nuclear reactor security, you name it. And they also developed this thing called Stuxnet, which attacks Siemens industrial control systems.
Now,
right?
that first got Iran's facility out there several years ago, correct? And they had
That's
some
right.
type of key that was hidden in the code to basically, essentially, a signature.
Yes, yeah, they used Stuxnet to I think it was a centrifuge for enriching nuclear material, and they're quite proud of that one actually. So you got an Israeli security team running security at Stuxnet. They went back to Israel in the week before the disaster. They went back home for whatever reason, and before they went, they installed these weird-looking security cameras in the cores of the reactors 3 and 4. Okay, here you see this tall, weird, goofy-looking camera, which is supposedly designed for high-resolution, feed for like far distances, and for whatever odd reason, they put it inside of these reactor cores. And to the left of that, you've got diagrams of what's got to look at it sideways, uranium gun type nuclear bombs. Well, look at the shapes. Well, interesting, ain't it? Got an Israeli security firm install these goofy cameras in a place where such cameras are not designed to operate. They happen to be the same shape as these gun type nukes. And reactor 3 and reactor 4, these massive structures, we're talking structural engineering on the scale of like a Hoover Dam. I mean, these were not tin can. What was that reactor that exploded in Russia, Chernobyl?
In Ukraine, it was Chernobyl, yeah.
Yeah, that was just a tin can piece of garbage compared to these things. These were massively well engineered structures. They were obliterated. Okay, and this is kind of like how the Twin Towers just collapsed into dust, from supposedly a couple of planes smacking into them.
It was the box cutters.
It's just absurd on the face of it. This is the only explanation. These were nuclear detonations. There's no getting around it. These were not hydrogen explosions. All right. And there's precedent for that too. I mean, 3 Mile Island had a hydrogen explosion, and nobody's hurt, nobody's killed. But there's like more scientific reasons why these couldn't have been hydrogen explosions, because I'm not very scientifically minded. I'm not too technically minded, but if I recall, according to Jim, it has something to do with the only way hydrogen can be produced in a nuclear core is if it's melting down. I think if it's under pressure, like it has to be like 2,000 psi, and there's zirconium cladding of the fuel rods, then is able at that pressure and temperature or whatever to release the hydrogen. But even if it releases the hydrogen, hydrogen just does not have this much oomph. It doesn't have the the destructive potential to obliterate, massive, massive structures like this. And with that said, I guess I should just go ahead and download and open the report itself. Okay, run this time. See if I can get this thing up in PDF, because I want to show you a lot of this depends on drone footage. While I'm doing this, did you want to ask me a question?
Well, I was just going to say what they probably did was they merged Mickey Mouse's DNA with Godzilla's, and then they planted it right there at that time, right? So that's how you've got that giant thing of, Mickey Mouse on steroids with nuclear fusion. It's incredible.
Still more believable than the official story. Okay. Yeah, here you've got pictures. This is from drone. There's a lot of drone footage. This is high resolution drone footage that was leaked by a website. I believe it was called Pink Tentacle. That Jim dug up. I just wanted to give you some sense of the scale here. And this is only a small. I've got this up on a. This is only a small portion of the overall image. Here's like an SUV.
Okay.
Now he cut and pasted this on the containment wall. Where is that? Let me see if I can find it. It's been a while since I've dug back into this, Rex. I took a break. I'm a little bit rusty.
Oh, you're fine. No, this is fine. And while you're doing this, I'm just thinking about how I saw some photographs of Fukushima, basically, I think 2 years after the event happened, and they were showing how nice it looked and how clean everything was and how it's all been new dirt's been brought out, etc. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, where have they put all the waste? And once we look through all this, just remind me if I forget, I'd like to get into how bad it really is and how the oceans look and stuff like that out there towards where you live, because there's a lot of stuff on the internet that's saying the oceans are dead and there's millions of fish coming up dead. I'm hearing that on a monthly basis now in the headlines. So
yeah, we'll get to that. I found the SUV. Okay,
there it is.
You see that? That's an SUV that he superimposed. He cut and pasted it against the containment wall. That's how thick the containment wall to this reactor was. All right, reinforced concrete. All right, and that's just one of several layers. Obliterated, just shot to shit. I mean, sky high. All right, this was not prompt criticality hydrogen explosion nonsense. And you get into the report. Arnie Gunderson, Arnie Gunderson, E&E News.
Yes.
Fairwinds. That guy. He's. If you look into this report, you'll see. Nuclear engineers, ranting on message boards about this guy. On their message boards, talking about how he's just like the most he ever did was run like 100-watt reactor in a college classroom somewhere. He's never run a nuclear reactor. He's shilling. He's not qualified to be making the declarations that he's out there making, and he's spreading disinfo. I think we think his purpose is to keep people's focus away from just how ludicrous this is on the sheer face of it. But then again, you're not going to see this drone footage anywhere else. Jim's he's a hardcore investigator. He dug this stuff up and analyzed it, and you're not going to see this anywhere else except in this report. Which just, it's drone footage from right afterward. It's very high definition drone footage. It was not meant to get out, and it did.
Can you move that box out of the way real quick? Just that one.
Box?
Yeah, that right there.
One?
Yeah, thanks.
Reactor 4's dome was removed for defueling. Drone photos prove it. Okay, and this dispels the rumors surrounding Unit 4's explosion. So, we've got photos of that in here as well. This is the dome. All right.
One thing I'm wondering about, James, too, is Chernobyl. When that thing blew, they were sending robots and everything that they could to try and redome it, fix the esophagus or whatever it's called. I think that might be the wrong term if it is. I'm sorry, but
You could say the throat. Yeah.
okay, so and the robots themselves, there was so much radiation that they were collapsing. They couldn't even withstand the amount of radiation. And I remember seeing photographs, black and white photos of these people that were exposed to heavy doses, and their hands were the size of basketballs, and just these crazy formalities, weird mutations and stuff like that. And I'm wondering why you don't see as much of that on the from the Fukushima, because also another thing too, when that did happen, James, I was right on it. I was doing like a lot of these pictures you're showing me and stuff like that. I'm getting deja vu because some of this stuff I remember seeing, not all of it, but some of it. And I remember also looking at the live webcams that were in Fukushima after it happened. I was watching it every night, and I could still see cars driving around, and I could see people out, lights in the city, lights in the towns and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, okay, there's still people out there. And I'm thinking, how bad is the exposure that they're getting? So what do you think the biggest difference between Chernobyl and Fukushima was?
Oh, well, the most important difference is just the quality of the design. These were not, these were extremely robust, massively well-engineered structures with multiply redundant, what are they called? Safety systems, cooling systems, passive cooling systems, just in case in case the transformers did go out, there were passive cooling systems that ought to have been passively engaged. I think because of the steam would have tripped valves that would, trigger passive cooling systems. And the reason that even the passive cooling systems were, failed, which is just statistically impossible, was because of the Stuxnet virus. But we'll get back to that later. From what I understand, the Chernobyl reactor was just, it was just poor Soviet design. It just wasn't a robust
Another thing too,
structure.
didn't they also? And I'm sorry to interrupt, James, but didn't they also put a whole bunch of plutonium in those reactors just like a week or something before that happened?
Where, Fukushima?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a side story that they put out to kind of take people off of the trail.
Okay.
I believe that initially came out at a blog called Fukushima Diary.
Okay. Yeah, I know that website as well.
I think it was a Japanese investigator. I'm really not qualified to totally call BS on that, but I'm going with this. I'm going with this report.
Well, this is what you know, so yeah, perfect.
We got hard data, and I'm just kind of scrolling through it here so that people can, as they're listening, they can kind of. It's so massive. I can't do it justice, in 2 hours. Here's where people are talking about how the quakes weren't normal, that it felt gooey, right? So they're probably heart quakes. And what else? So these are the emails from people in Japan that I was talking about.
Okay.
And we're going to come soon here, I believe. I'm going to show you here's the lack of damage in Sendai as the,
where's that in relation to Fukushima?
Well, Sendai is the region of Japan where Fukushima is located.
Okay.
So this is Fukushima, territory right here.
And with a 9.0 earthquake, you would think that if that's where it happened, there'd be some type of, giant cracking in the roads and stuff. Even
yeah.
Huh.
Well, there'd be something, even this little car park here, this fence, there's nothing, So there's that, and here's the Kobe damage that we talked about. Here's information on the Richter scale to get people to understand, just how massive a 9 is. Just after the earthquake. Now, where are the Japanese seismograms, Jim? Where are they?
How many 9.0 earthquakes have there been in known history?
Known history?
No, have there been that many?
I don't know. This one says 1 per 10 to 50 years.
Okay.
Okay. So there have been very few. But they have occurred, and you can check You can check out what they've done in the past. Now I want to find the Japanese seismic. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Now we're getting into this is from Japanese seismographs. These are Japanese seismographs, right? And because they're Japanese and they're not Richter, you got to kind of go in and study them out and look at the numbers and see what he's trying to tell you here. But there were several inland that were just not nearly as energetic. All right. So there's the information. He had to go in and, use, I guess, Google Translate to dig into the Japanese computers and pull this information out. But this is what seismically, this is what really happened that day from the Japanese, not from the USGS. Okay. So here we got the information of where the quakes really did take place. And then we get into the reasons here for why he believed it happened, because this is a common question that people, frequently ask is, what's the motive? Why would they want to do this? And there are different theories about that. But his idea is one that Japan had offered to enrich uranium for Iran to help them with their enrichment program. And also that, as it says here, updated information in case that Japan was being held under threat to hand over trillions of yen to the World Bank and refused. A friend of mine did some service to this report before its news. I won't say his name. He wouldn't want that. It was posted by Glenn Kennedy at Before It's News. This article gives you, it just provides some additional comparative perspective on earthquake intensities and what earthquakes have done in the past.
Okay.
Gives you some additional comparative info, just as an appendix to the report, as it were. So you can find this at Before It's News. If you Google Before It's News and then the title is Fukushima, Japan's 9/11. It'll come right up. Start. Can you see it?
No. Yeah, we're good.
All right. So beforeitsnews.com, Fukushima, Japan's 9/11. Posted by Glenn Kennedy. And again, this is one of these things where Glenn Kennedy is a big time poster at Before It's News. He gets tens of thousands of views. And this this article just went nowhere. I think the hit count was under 1,000. Just another example.
I think I was one of those 1,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so this is not your first exposure to this info.
No, this is like the second or third time I've gotten deja vu in this interview. It's great.
Okay, good. So anyway, this is just I think it's great that we have this screencast, because rather than worrying about getting all the details out into this interview verbally, I can just show people here's where you can go. It's going to take time to go through it, longer than we have in this interview.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where you go. Here's additional information on earthquake intensities and comparative perspective. Now, going back to the report itself, this is what page is this? I don't know. It doesn't say. It's below the Japanese seismograms, and this is a really good part of the report. This is like his timeline of what happened in what order. Oh, on the left here is a really cool graphic of earthquake magnitude scale. You see that? 8.7, 8.8, 8.9. See how that, I mean, look at that thing. I mean, there's Kobe down here. You can't even see it down here at the bottom,
Okay.
And then way up here is what supposedly happened off the coast of Japan. Anyways, so I think it's kind of worth, it would be worth it just to take a few minutes just to go through this 1, 2, 3, 4 thing here. One, Japan offers to enrich uranium for Israel's great state in Iran. Japan doesn't go along with the World Bank banksters. Yada yada. There's some motivation. Two, immediately Israel sets up front companies masquerading as security companies, and one of them succeeds in getting a security contract at a Japanese nuclear facility. 4 months later, the Dimona Dozen, he calls them the Dimona Dozen. Dimona is the place in Israel where they're based out of. The Dimona Dozen shows up, and under the cover of a security contract, gets unlimited access to the heart of Fukushima. They plant the virus, the Stuxnet virus, install real cameras outside the facility and functional, poorly disguised nuke cameras inside the facility. In addition to this, they install an unauthorized data connection to allow control of all the guts of the facility via the virus. They admitted to this connection, as discussed later on this page. And that's true. One thing to add here, an internet data connection inside a nuclear facility is forbidden by international, law. It's absolutely out of bounds. Can't do that. I think it was Haaretz that published the fact that the Israelis were monitoring the destroyed remains via an internet data connection. They actually admitted that in one of their newspapers. After installing Stuxnet and the nukes, they scram. Israel waits for one of the many natural quakes in Japan to provide cover for a tsunami bomb. I'm not so sure about that. I think, and that's another thing. It was on 3/11. Hello.
What do you think's significant about the numerological date of 3/11/11?
Well, I just know that these people, if you can call them that, they're just into their numerology and they're into their satanic holidays and they're into that stuff. And so, 9/11, 4/11, then 3/11. I mean, it's just something that makes you go, I'm thinking that, it was planned to happen that day and maybe they used HARP or some other technology to induce the cover quakes. So the tsunami bomb, they already have it at the bottom of the Japan trench. VLF communications are established with bombs to penetrate the water. Okay, tsunami comes in, swamps Stuxnet infected power plant, direct video feed from legitimate cameras, security company installed, gets to David. That's his, he means Israel. Via totally unauthorized channel. Israeli prime minister calls Japan and says, take that for offering to help Iran. And there are 5 more nukes in the ocean off the coast of Japan. And we are going to set those off and destroy your coastal cities. If you do not forget that 6.67 and say it was a 9 to cover for tsunami effects. And now we're going to make your people demand you move away from nuclear power so you can never threaten us like that again. We're blowing up Fukushima Daiichi and you're going to go along with whatever story we tell you. So there. David and his pals close all valves to the reactors via the remote data link they admitted to installing, put them in full throttle to melt them down while the virus keeps control room readouts displaying false info, like nothing is going on. So the engineers, that's what the Stuxnet does. It scrambles the systems, but it sends normal readings back to the control panels, and the engineers don't even know that everything's going haywire. Like nothing is going on, even though the place is coming apart after enough mayhem ensues to provide plausibility to set off planet nukes and blow the place sky high. And then, that's the basic storyline in a nice summary right there. Again, it does get a lot more detail. There's a lot more technical detail involved in this that I don't have the throat or the time to get it all out. But I'm glad I can scroll through this here on your screen and kind of, here's a bit about reactor 4 had been defueled and proven disassembled. Therefore, no explosion there was possible. All right. What should have happened at reactor 4, if anything at all, the fuel pools should have melted down and caught fire once the water boiled off from the lack of recirculation at worst, and badly contaminated the containment structure. Nothing else. No explosions, nothing else. Reactor 4 is building 7, period. So here it is, folks, here it is. So where do you want to go from there?
Okay, so after that happened, I watched that. I watched the webcams and stuff like that, the video footage of the explosions, and there's 6 reactors out there. And then shortly after, you see people that are basically in these jumpsuits, it looks like. They don't look very high-tech, or the radiation protection doesn't seem that good, really, especially considering what happened. Now, there's the speculation of the plutonium being put in there shortly before that you said might be disinformation. I do know, at least from the information that I've done, in 2009, France had sent a ginormous amount of plutonium to Japan, the biggest ever. And the interesting thing is, if you know much about predictive programming, this is just food for thought also. In the movie Knowing, you can see there are several scenes in there that actually portray the little hints, little nuggets. If you watch the movie, for example, one part of the movie where Nicolas Cage is sitting down, he's actually drinking some scotch, watching the news. It shows an oil tanker blowing up on TV, and the date that it shows is 4/20/2010. That's the same date that the oil tanker got put on fire, and there's that giant event that happened in the Gulf. And then also after that, Nicolas Cage looks at his notes that have predictive dates and number sequences on it, and the film shows the numbers 666 and then 81. Also, 81 is the country code for Japan. Then he looks at the clock on the wall, and it's an old school clock, or not on the wall. This one's actually the old school alarm clock. And when the numbers flip over, hits midnight, the time to the bottom, as soon as it hits midnight, the bottom corner of the clock shows Japan. And for those that have heard of the doomsday clock, when it hits midnight, that's the doomsday Armageddon. So in that movie, why are they showing the same name, Japan, at the bottom of the alarm clock when it hits midnight? So, because knowing it was released in 2009, and that's quite interesting.
Well, I guess you're getting into predictive programming and all that.
Well, exactly. I mean, you tell me. I mean, is it just a coincidence? It must be just a coincidence.
Well, I'm a firm believer that I don't know. There just seems to be some kind of
all alarm clocks when they get midnight, it says Japan on the bottom right, doesn't it?
right. Yeah, yeah. I think that they're they. We use it. We throw that word around, but let's just use it. They, for lack of a more specific one, they with a capital T. They seem to be bound by some kind of a universal. I call it the Dracula law. They have to. It's kind of like how Dracula has to be invited into you have to invite Dracula into your house, or he can't come in. Like they have to warn. They have to make notification before they can go ahead and do something. It might be in page D13 of the local newspaper, but they have to put it out there somehow before they can go ahead and do it.
Well, and I've came up with another theory as well on top of that, because I am very well at that theory, but let me ask you this. What do you think about the possibility of, if you know psychology and if you've seen the actual physical evidence of when people's brains react, when they see something happen on TV, certain parts of the brain are activated, the same parts of the brain that somebody that actually is going through that event, the same parts of their brain are activated as well. So why not get 100 million people to watch a film, and not only does it give you the predictive programming to sell your product or pitch your laws or agendas or whatever, but also at the same time manifest reality, because everything starts from imagination first. So let's get everybody on the same page, and then maybe that's a way for these people to kind of do their magical orchestrations, I guess you could say, practical magic, because they're not cutting the heads off of chickens and spreading the blood on altars that I know of, but they are putting stuff in the movies to get people linked at a psychological primordial level.
Yeah. Neurophysical, technological, black magic. Yeah, I can go there, certainly. I think, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's part of that. Also, I think they kind of get off on it.
They enjoy it, like the bully picking on someone smaller than him in school.
Well, just, the whole mockery deal. They just love mocking the masses. Have you ever interviewed Mark Passio?
No.
Or of him, of his work? Yeah. Former satanic high priest. Maybe not high priest, but former satanic priest in Church of Satan under LaVey. And he's just done hundreds of hours of seminars on how they think and what they get off on, and their occult principles that they operate by. You might want to look into his work. You might want to have him on the show, and he would be a good one to talk to about this element of it.
Sure. Okay.
He's got a whole series on occult mockery, put it that way. So, anyways,
back to the subject at hand. Now, there's a lot of speculation about how bad the effects are. What type of stuff are you seeing out where you're at? And we were talking before the show, this was a few days ago, when you said a lot of stuff out there in the mainstream about saying the oceans are dying and everything's collapsing. That's disinformation.
Well, I really don't have a firm opinion on that. I do know that, well, what is that image that they like to trot out?
What's it like where you're at out there in South Korea? Did you notice some weird weather after it happened? Did because there was that weird black snow that was going on in Japan for a while shortly after, in Tokyo and stuff that they were finding.
No, didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Let me see here. What what do you say, Fukushima.
Did they have warnings on the fish or the seafood or anything for a while? The dairy products?
Yeah, as I remember, they did. Oh, wait a minute, not Fukushima, Pacific Ocean.
So it was talked a lot about in the media and such when you were out there during the time. They didn't keep it quiet.
For a while, I seem to remember some of that, but then it died out. This one right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This, I believe, this is the one that has been spread far and wide as being some kind of a chart of a radiation chart.
Yeah, I've seen this before. It looks pretty spooky.
Well, it's a wave height chart.
Okay.
This is the wave heights from the. I think, if I remember correctly, this is the wave heights from the tsunami throughout the Pacific Ocean. But people who are into the fear mongering side of it like to pass this around as a radiation chart, which it isn't. Jim, I believe, I don't want to speak for him on this, but he has in the past expressed skepticism about, this Pacific Ocean is dying thing. And he based it on, scientific knowledge that he has about ionizing radiation and how far it can travel in water. It can't travel very far, apparently. He seems to be pretty skeptical about this whole the ocean is dying narrative. The animal die-offs, well, I've read, again, I'm not a scientist. So I'm not making any claims here. I'm just saying that I've seen it claimed by people who claim to have scientific expertise that die-offs happen all the time. They're a part of nature.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is James Farganne. James reached out to us here on the Leak Project a few weeks ago, and because of the time zone difference, he's on the other side of the world, we've been trying to put together a time frame for him to discuss the information that he has on one of the most catastrophic events in modern history. The Fukushima disaster. 6 nuclear reactors going into meltdown, and the official version of the story is because of a tidal wave that caused certain mechanical issues and breakdowns, which then led to 6 reactors going into meltdown and blowing up. Well, the information that James is going to share with us here today is quite different. So be prepared for a mind-altering, paradigm-shattering discussion. James, really appreciate you spending time out of your day. I know you're very busy where you're at, so thanks a lot for joining us here at the Leak Project. If you would please just give us a real brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll get into why you feel this is important to put yourself on the line and discuss the possibility of Fukushima being a lot more of a tactical attack than just a natural disaster.
Yeah, Rex, thank you for having me on. I am conducting this interview from Seoul, South Korea, which is not too distant from the epicenter of the disaster. And I don't want to get too much into my personal history, but I will say that I've been here for quite a long time, and it's my home. So when this thing struck, well, I looked at it with a lot more curiosity than perhaps most did, and it set me off on a real journey of discovery and into a real pitched battle in trying to spread information that the powers that be really they didn't intend it to get out, and when it did, well, it was a real pitched battle, and it took a lot out of me. I had to take some time off, and this is my, climbing back into the saddle, so to speak. So if I could, I would say that your listenership is pretty 9/11 literate, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay, so just to couch this in a nutshell, Fukushima was Japan's 9/11, and Reactor 4 was Japan's Building 7. Is that clear and succinct enough?
So, well, Tower 7 was a heavily fortified building. I mean, it had a lot of very sensitive material, and nothing hit Tower 7, yet it collapsed within its own footprint. I mean, it was actually protected by other buildings. So, the official version, why it collapsed within its own footprint, is pretty ridiculous. I mean, so let's blame it on alien technology of box cutters from people that live in the Middle East. I think that's a real good explanation of that event. So yeah, don't worry about the box cutters. There's alien technology in them, so you can't take those on an airplane. That's
Well,
the official version.
we've got the owner of the building on tape saying pull it. Okay, but the point being that and we've got the footage of the BBC reporter reporting its collapse
Right.
20 minutes before it went down, and it's standing in the skyline behind her.
Yeah.
Okay, so the point being that Building 7 was impossible. Okay, I mean, the official account of how it went down is impossible. All right, in the same fashion, Reactor 4 at Fukushima was flat out impossible. And this is really the linchpin. And I'll just come out and say it. It's a good place to start because uh, I'll start with just the fact, and then I'll back it up. Building 7 on the day of the disaster, or not Building 7, Reactor 4 on the day of the Fukushima disaster was mothballed for maintenance and refueling. This means that the dome over the core had been removed. The core had been removed. It was disassembled. It was not operating on the day of the disaster. Now, a mothballed reactor does not explode. Moreover, a mothballed reactor does not explode I mean, there's just so much to this. These GE designed reactors were massive structures. I mean, we're talking 9 foot thick rebar reinforced concrete. We're talking, solid steel, layers of solid steel, several feet thick. And this thing was obliterated. You look at if you look at the gemstone.is website that you've got there on the screen. To the upper, kind of to the right, Cornerstone Report, Fukushima Sabotage, and you're going to see an image below that link. Now that is the link to the 48-page PDF report that lays all this out in all the detail. Jim Stone is the man who did the report. He's the man that did all the research and put the report together and had to flee the United States afterwards. You see the image to the right.
Wait a second. He had to flee the United States?
He had to flee the United States. We'll get to that in a minute. I just want to finish this point. You see
Okay.
that there's that PDF image under the Fukushima Sabotage link. The third image to the right, you see that explosion?
Oh yeah.
That's Reactor 4, which was not operating and disassembled on that day. Okay? That's why we say that is Japan's Building 7. That does not happen. See, two reactors exploded, Reactor 3 and Reactor 4. Reactor 3 exploded in an outright mushroom cloud. Reactor 4, that might be Reactor 3 that we're looking at right there because it's a mushroom cloud. But Reactor 4 was a very similar explosion, just as intense, and it was disassembled and not operating. The official narrative that's pushed by people like Arnie Gunderson, who's a fraud and a shill, is that these were hydrogen explosions, which is just rank and utter nonsense. That's I just put out one linchpin there. That's one of two real linchpins in this. Now, yes, he had to flee the country. So yeah, where do you want to go with this next?
Well, let me just bring that up for a moment. So he had to flee the country. Do you personally know why, and can you share that with us here this evening?
Well, I know the story that he told me and others, okay? And so just to back up and kind of bring this back to a more personal level, I was here on, March 11th, and I saw the footage of the tsunami coming in, and I was stunned, I kind of it kind of took me back to being in New York on 9/11. I wasn't in Japan, but being close to home, I was just dumbfounded, and I had a weird feeling about it. I didn't quite know why, but I'm a very strongly intuitional person, and just something about it bugged me, and I became kind of obsessed with it. I kept watching it and watching it, and just like, something's not right about this. Something's not right about this. But, I just couldn't put my finger on it. Now, at the time, I was a big follower of Jeff Rentz, Rentz.com. I was kind of a Rentz newsfeed junkie. Are you familiar with this site?
Oh, very familiar.
Yeah. It's kind of a dark labyrinth of doom. And, I was just, obsessively searching for truth, Now, and I've got a really good BS detector. I don't fall for nonsense. I'm real careful about what I incorporate into my worldview. Um, Very selective. And I was just digging, 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 digging. I was just obsessively. Uh, I just knew that I had to find something. Now, one day I was digging through Rentz's newsfeed, and I saw a link to this report. Pulled it up, skimmed through it. Wow, I got to study this thing. Started to really, study it. Wow, I was blown away. And it was on a kind of a, sorry, Jim, but, it was kind of a, not a very slick website, nothing slick. Obviously, it didn't have any kind of money behind it. It was all just like hand coded HTML, kind of slipshod, which kind of, for me, it kind of gave it